So yeah, let's just start one by one from your school, from your courses, and then to your honors, etc., etc. Before you start, I want to let you know that we're going to divide this discussion into two parts. So in the first discussion, we're going to really focus on your application and on the things you wrote and you positioned yourself as, and really discuss why do you think you got in and why do you think you got the acceptance you got. And in the second part, I really want to focus on your advice to other international applicants watching us and how to approach the supplemental essays, how to structure activities, how to tailor them, which themes are trending in the common application, etc., etc., etc. If that's clear, I think we could begin.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm just going to jump in quickly with a little plug first. I run my TikTok, which gives advice for international students, kind of similar to what you do. So if people want to check that out, it's ELISAS_Y, and that has all my stuff as well.
If you're
Can you
interested
link it?
in the blog of Elisa on TikTok, definitely follow her. I'll leave the link in the description.
Alright, cool. So I'll just start. So I did the IB in my school, and then I did 4 HLs. So the normal is 3. So like my recommendation is try and take like the hardest course load you can. So if you can do 4, take 4 HLs. I did history, politics, chemistry, math AA, HLs. And for my SLs, I did English and language. So I did Malay. I would recommend as well, because on the Harvard website, if you're aiming for Harvard, it says they want 4 years of continuous language study. So I did the same language for all 4 years of high school. So that's something I would recommend.
Just as a person who's not that familiar with IB system, and just to clarify for some people who might not be familiar, as far as I understand, do you choose subjects that you're interested in to take, or how does IB system work in general?
Oh yeah, for sure. So you have different categories if you're doing the IB diploma. So some people do courses where you can just take like however many courses you want, but for most schools you do a diploma. So you get to take 6 subjects, and you do normally 3 hires and 3 standards. So hires are the harder ones you spend more time on. But if your school lets you, some people can take 4, which is what I did. And for each thing you have a category. So you have the humanities, so you can take like either history, politics, economics, like anything humanities. And then you have to take one of them. Then you have to take a math, and there's 2 different options for math. And then you have to take a science as well. So either chemistry, DT, sports science, biology, whatever. And then you have to do a first language. So for me, that was English. And then you have to do a foreign language. So for me, it was Malay. Then you get one free choice. So my free choice was politics, because I wanted to do humanities.
Oh, that's very, very unique system. So did you apply as a STEM major? You were engineering?
Oh, no, I applied as a government major, actually.
Oh, really? Oh, that's very, very interesting. Let's, with that hook, maybe with it intrigue, dive into your honors.
So most of my stuff was from either like first or second year of high school or third year. And I think that's really important as well, because I applied early. So if you want to apply early, make sure you start doing stuff sort of like early on as well.
Yes.
And my honors were economics, essay competition. This is the John Locke competition. I got top 5. And I think what made it more impressive to them was I didn't do econs in high school at all. But I was like, oh, I'm interested in it. So I framed it as well when I talked to like them about it, saying that I've never learned econs formally, but I wanted to try it out. So I think that showed sort of initiative.
Academic
and then
initiative.
There's a math yeah. And then there was a math competition that we had. It's like the Olympiad kind of, but it's like for UK schools. So I got the top 8% 3 years in a row for that. And then that's more a STEM side, because in my application I talked about how yes, I was interested in the humanities, but also more like the quantitative side, so the STEM related side. So that's why I have STEM and also humanities, which I think made me a bit more different from the typical like gov econs kid. And then this was a more government one. I did a policy presentation where I came first in my state, and I got to go to a national competition after it. And then that's a national competition. And then there was a debate competition as well, hosted by Oxford, that I won. So yeah, my future plans I put were government and policy making.
Very impressive honors, as far as I can say. Like, as a person who's seen applications of people who got into Princeton and Harvard and Duke, I think the honors are far more impressive. Like, even as a person, like from a person who got into other Harvards, like for example, when we viewed Ryan's honors, like Ryan's a great guy, don't get me wrong, like his application is very impressive, but it was more of national level. And here I can really see the international exposure, which, how do you think international honors helped you to get into Harvard? And were they even that important?
Yeah, for sure. So I think as an international student, well, part of the reason I did mostly international stuff was there were no like organized competitions on the Malaysian scale. which is what I talked about as well in my Conrad essay about how Malaysia doesn't have anything. So I had to like go internationally, which is more difficult. So I tried to found stuff within Malaysia to help students as well. So I think the honors themselves weren't as important as the narrative I had about how I took that experience and then I did something with it. Because I have heard of people internationally who got in without having like crazy honors as well, because they recognize like US students have a lot more opportunities, I would say. I think tying into actually, that's a really good way to start the activity section, because the first one is, like I mentioned, I started an MUN conference because there's no like opportunities for international students. So I basically made a free online MUN conference. And this was the main theme of my Common App essay as well, which we'll see in a bit.
Free online MUN.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that sounds very unique. Interesting.
Yeah, it was very cool. And then we got a grant from the United Nations themselves for $3,000. The MUN conference, we got funding from the United Nations, which I think made it seem more legitimate, because a lot of people make passion projects, right? But it doesn't have like proof of actually doing stuff until you get like quantitative facts of like validation kind of. Yes. So I think that was really important. And my Common App was mainly based around it as well. Because I know a lot of people make a passion project, but I think unless you really have a narrative behind it and sell it in your essays, like it's not as important, because it's just going to look like something you did like for no purpose, right? And then, I'll just keep going, like stop me if anything that's not clean. So then I did some research, but I know a lot of people in the US for like researchers programs and stuff. From my experience and from those around me, like that's not a thing. So I like went on LinkedIn and I basically emailed a bunch of people or like messaged people I found cool. You're like, hi, I want to help out whatever research. And then you just have to spam email basically everyone and pray you get something. And I was very lucky I did. And I got a like research internship for a bit when I helped analyze the transparency of Malaysian charities. And then we basically used the findings to try and lobby for more legislation, like making it be more transparent, because they had no disclosure requirements or very few.
Making the legislation of Malaysia more transparent.
Oh, it wasn't so much actually policy. It was more we did the research and then we made recommendations, but there was not that much policy related stuff.
Sure. You said it was...
yeah, for sure.
Analyze the transparency of Malaysian charities. All right. What did you found? Are they truthful?
Oh yeah. So basically so when you go on their website, right? Like if you go on an international charities website, there's like impact reports. There's like very clear what they did and what the money went to. But for a lot of Malaysian charities, the same level of disclosure wasn't there because the law didn't require it. So we tried to highlight the fact that there was no disclosure. Like most of them didn't even have a website. There was no way to contact them. So we just highlighted that and we're like, there should be reform basically in the laws.
Next is journalism publication.
Yeah. So one of my angles in my essay was actually social media activism. So I think that complements it as well, because I did some journalism stuff and I made video documentaries for social impact. So I was selected for this camp where it was basically a fully sponsored trip for like a weekend. They paid for hotels, they paid for food and whatever. And I think if you get into a free program, like uni is looking at well when you apply, because it shows like it's not a pay to win sort of program. Like a lot of the summer camps people go to, like they aren't valued because you pay to go. So it's not as like impactful, I guess. So this one was, basically I got to make a documentary of a refugee alternative learning center, which is like a school because they can't go to government schools here. They have special schools for them. And then we just made a video about basically the lack of education they actually received and the opportunities they didn't have. And then the Canadian High Commission reposted the documentary I made, which I think also helped my application a bit. Okay, and then the next thing I did was also social media related. So it was at basically an NGO again, and then I was managing the social media for them. And we basically made a public education campaign because the Malaysian general election was then. And this was the first year that 18-year-olds could vote in Malaysia. So we were making some educational content so they understood their rights, understood who they were voting for, and just like general public education. And then I was the one who led the TikTok initiative, which I think helped. And then this tied into the other work I did, which I mentioned in my Common essay. So I think it's really important to have cohesive stuff. So it's like you did it multiple times. It's not just doing it one time. So I did it in this one. And then in my essay, they see it again in a different circumstance with the same skill. And then the bottom, so I structured it so the top ones were my more important ones. And then the bottom ones are more just random stuff about me, which I thought they would like to see like I'm a real person and I'm not just like a bunch of activities, right? So here I have, I was the captain of my first team in school, which is like the A team or whatever. I don't know how it is in the US. But the first team for field hockey. And then as well, I showed I did some charity as well. So in the team, we basically have an annual match where we try and raise funds for the local school and we buy them equipment as well. So I mentioned the work I did there. And then I used to figure skate, which I thought was quite interesting because I actually met the Harvard Figure Skating Club before, and I talked to one of the skaters on the team. I don't think it was that important, but I think showing that I could fit in Harvard was important because the rest of my sports, like field hockey, is like not as significant in Harvard. Netball and whatever were played in the US. But figure skating is something Harvard admissions officers could read and be like, okay, we can see her contributing to the figure skating team as well, and not just being like another Harvard student. And as well, I try to highlight my Malaysian roots. I think as an international, you should be showing that you can bring a diverse perspective. So I talked about the cultural stuff I did as well. So for Malaysia Day, which is our national day, I helped choreograph the performance and I talked about that a bit. And then here's just some school-based charity stuff I did, which was quite cool. Once again, more culture stuff, which is like Nations Day. I'm not sure if you know what Nations Day is.
Nations?
Nations Day.
All right. You could tell me more about it.
Oh yeah, no, sure. So it's basically just because I'm from an international school, so there's different cultures, right? And then we have a little fair when we just have different foods.
Oh yeah,
sure.
We have the same thing, but that's just the name is different. Yeah, sure.
Oh yeah, but yeah, it was very cute, and I just talked about how I helped out in school as well. And then I think as well I mentioned music. So in my common activities, I talked about being a competitive pianist. And then in one of my supplemental essays, I talked about playing the violin as well. So that showed like there was a lot going on. Like I'm not just doing one thing, which I think is interesting. One thing I've heard, which I think is really good advice if people want to apply to the US, is you need to have a very clear spike. So for me, that's my social media and politics stuff, but also to be like decent in most other things. So music, I was all right. Sports, I did stuff. Like it wasn't like amazing, but it wasn't bad as well.
I heard an opinion about the T-shaped person, that the US universities look for a T-shaped person, and this stick of T represents your spike. So like more activities, more honors for your concentration for your major, and then this side of the T is more representative of more diverse stuff that you were involved in. So for example, let's take your application as an example. You did lots of politics and social media and like first and honors and extracurriculars. First, I think 5 are really more about politics, but then I can also see social justice and cultural activities and charities. And I think at least that's what I heard, that US universities really look for spike, but at the same time, they want to see diverse experiences that you were involved in. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's the same. I've never heard of the T model, but I quite like it. Like that's basically what I think is important as well. And that's what I talk about. And then, so the final thing was at the refugee center. And that's something I talk about in my supplements as well. So I think it's important as well when you mention in your activity section to try and link it to your other essays. So like you flesh it out, because it's not like if someone just reads this, like it doesn't tell them very much, because they want to know as much as what you did. They want to know what you learned and what you will continue doing. So you have to have a clear story. But here, basically, I taught at a refugee school during my summer break. I'm helping them with chemistry for the first 2 years of high school. And I guess for my essays, how are we going to go about this? Should I just leave it on the screen so people can read it, or?
No, I will leave the file in the description. So guys, you can go to the description, download the file, or read the personal essay themselves. In our discussion, we're just going to sum up the point and the main points of the personal essay. And we're going to do the same thing for supplemental essays as well. So,
all right, perfect. So I guess I'll just summarize what I wrote and then talk about why I did it.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So when choosing the prompt, honestly, I'd say don't worry too much about the prompt at first. Just write like what you think is important and then find the best prompt to fit. So the way I approached it was first, I wanted to start with something a bit random. So here, like Mondays always suck. February, like that's just a bit odd. Like they'll be like, what the hell is this kid doing? And then I talked about a Netflix show getting cancelled. Once again, a bit of a what is this on about? And then I linked it to social media activism. So for me, as I said, my story was social media activism.
Yes.
And when the Harvard admissions officer like emailed me saying like, congrats, you got in, this is why we chose you, they sent you like one reason. And for me, they said, we appreciate your social media activism. So to me, that was really good. It's like, okay, they realized what I was trying to show them.
This is really
so
interesting.
One thing, yeah.
We could talk about your email. We could talk about what admissions officer wrote later, but I really like your hook. This is certainly something that draws the reader in to understand what's going on.
Yeah. But yes, I just think when you have your essay, just think that they want to remember you by one thing. So try and think what you want them to remember you by. So here's social media activism, and I'll elaborate a bit more. But basically, Then I talked about how as a kid, I made a social media petition to renew a show that got cancelled. And then it didn't happen. So I got fed up and I was like, social media activism is useless. And then I talked about, but later I changed my belief because the question was reflecting the time you challenged the belief. So you had to really answer the prompt as well. So I basically talk about the work I did at Undi 18, which is I told you about the general election and running TikTok campaigns to basically make sure youth understood their rights and went to vote. And then I try to include statistics as well of like what I did. So my impact was clear. So 100,000 views is something like they can see and be like, okay, that's legit. It's not like I made a post that got like 10 likes or something.
Yes.
And then I linked it here. So if the admissions officer knew about the show, I don't know if they did, but I just linked that in to show like I actually watched the show and I wasn't making this up. So try and find ways to prove that you're not making stuff up as much as you can. So this was a reference to the show. And then I talked about an experience when I actually went outside and someone recognized me from the TikToks I made, and then how that impacted me. And then this was the experience. And then what I learned was social media activism was useful. I was using it the wrong way at first. And then here I talk about in MUN, which was the Malay United Nations conference I founded. And once again, like I put some stats in of how much we got to the UN grant, how many students we reached. And then basically I was highlighting the work I did so Harvard can imagine like, I've learned this and I've started this and then I will continue doing it. So like it shows that there's real story. It's not just, oh, I did it once, now let me in because I did it.
Yeah.
And then I quite like my ending because I linked it to the start as well. So Monday still sucks. And it's like, it's a nice sort of tale, like you start and finish with the same thing.
So as far as I can see from your personal statement, you try to make your personal statement link all of your activities and to show the meaning behind to you, right? And how you grew through those activities. Nice.
For sure.
You started off with social media, saying how you first didn't like it, but then changed your view on it, and then it went talk about how you were recognized, and then I think it was about more about politicians, right? How you helped to youth to understand who they're voting for actually, and the last one is about UN. I really like the structure. Like each paragraph is devoted to a different side of you, a different growth aspect maybe. So that's one thing. And also I think an important thing that I mentioned several times in our last discussion, but guys, just because it worked for Elisa, it doesn't mean it will work for you. So you might be thinking, oh, Elisa wrote about social media and political activism. I'll write about the same thing and I'll get into Harvard. Unfortunately, if that's how the way it worked, Harvard would be full of everyone and it wouldn't be as prestigious as it is. But through this narrative, I just want you guys to understand this, how important it is to really show your narrative and make admissions officers really think of you in one word. So for example, in terms of Elisa is social media activism. So what would be your thing? It could be engineering, it could be research, it could be music. For example, Ryan was a musician. So try to think of ways you can be identified in several words, as Elisa mentioned. So interesting, all connecting personal statement. Now let's get into the most interesting part, I think, the most creative part, supplemental essays. Oh, sorry, before we continue, what were the majors that you chose and contribution that you indicated in the general questions?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think I see. Okay. So my SET was 1006 as well, which I think really helped. If you're international, I think having a good standardized score is important because they don't understand our grading system as much, I would say.
What was your score again?
Okay.
Sorry, could you repeat?
1600.
Oh, perfect score, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. No comments, just impressed.
Thank you.
Government, philosophy, and economics.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about philosophy because I certainly can see why it is government. I can certainly see why it is economics. But could you please elaborate on the philosophy part and how you developed it?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, this was mainly because in the UK, I applied for PPE, which is philosophy, politics, and economics. So I basically already had that interest. And one of the essays I wrote, actually, I stole a bit from my UK essay. So if I scroll down quickly, I think, the intellectual one, I talk about philosophy there. So we can go a bit more into that there. But
Yes.
just for me, it made sense, like logistically, to apply to similar things in different countries to save
Yes.
myself the work.
Yep. Pretty interesting. And your
Yeah.
contribution?
Contribution, is that this section
Oh, yeah,
about
yeah.
like what I wanted to do on campus? Yeah. So I put MUN because that's obviously the main thing I did, so it made sense. Debate, and then I put a sports thing as well to show I would be doing stuff on campus that wasn't just like sitting and doing like academic stuff. And then yeah,
Political
I think yeah,
groups,
the
cultural
rest of
groups.
it.
Yep. Life
Yeah.
experiences. So before, let's not go one by one, but let's just summarize your essay because I think people can read it on their own if they're interested.
Hmm.
I want to talk about how you approach your and maybe strategize your supplemental essays. So was it in this essay I will show my academic side, and this essay I'll show my cultural side, and in this essay, for example, community service. How did you strategize and how did you approach writing supplemental essays in general?
Okay, yeah, for sure. So, once again, little plug on my TikTok, I have a full thing on what you should put in each essay. But for me personally, what I did was I wrote a list of things that I wanted to tell Harvard about. So I didn't look at the prompts yet. I was just like, okay, I want them to know A, B, C about me. So for me, it was that my work with refugees. I wanted them to know a bit more about me academically because I feel my Common App essay was more about extracurriculars. There wasn't anything too academic in it. So I wanted to talk about that. And I also wanted to show a bit more my music side because that wasn't really shown in my rest of my application.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, I then looked at the different prompts and I was like, okay, where can I slot this in the best I can? And then I think what's important as well is for my intellectual bit, I wanted to show I really researched Harvard. So I know a lot of people will be like, oh, this school is really good. I want to go. Please let me in. Your school's really good. But instead, I looked at things in Harvard that I could actually see myself joining and that were a bit more random, or a bit more specific. And I was like, okay, I want to do this. And I told them, your school is cool because you have this, and I can do this because I've done X, Y, Z in the past. And they'll let me sneak in like the stuff I did as well. So it wasn't just like a love letter to Harvard. I think the best way to show how I integrated it is just to go through. So I won't like actually talk about each essay, but I'll just briefly highlight what they all did.
Sure, sure. I really want to focus on
So,
each essay. So,
oh yeah.
yeah, let's start.
Okay, yeah, sure. So for the life experiences one, this is the one when it's basically the why Harvard essay, but they don't actually say that. But here's I talked about my refugee thing, and then I linked. So I talked about the work I did previously, and then I also made a personal link. But then the way I try to make this why Harvard was then I talked about the Philip Brooks Association, which is like the charity organization in Harvard, and I was like, so I did this in the past, and I will continue doing it at your organization at your school, so it's specific to them. And then a tip, if you're applying to many schools in the US, what I did after other schools was basically I repurposed the same stuff. Then I just changed it to in Yale, I'll do whatever in Yale. So that's like a tip that can help you as well.
That's nice.
And, and then this one is the bit I explained a bit more my philosophy stuff. So once again, I tried to start with a bit of a random hook, and then this was more academic. So if you're writing a UK personal statement, I've literally stole paragraphs from a UK personal statement. But then I talk about the philosophy stuff I did. And then I talked about economics, and then I talked about government, and I talked about specific courses as well. So that showed them like how it makes sense, how I will fit in.
Yeah.
For ECs, this is when I talked a bit about violin as well. But what I did to make it a bit interesting was because normally people talk about violin and they talk about performance anxiety, right? But that's quite basic. But that was my story. So instead I tried to link it to debate, which made it a bit more interesting. So it was violin, but linking to debate and politics, which was my main application, which I think drew them in a bit. And then this one, I try to show a bit more on being Malaysian. So I talk about the similarities with the Malaysian justice system and the US justice system, which must have been interesting to them because obviously they won't hear that all the time. I linked it to previous research work I did and previous internships. Once again, I just mentioned a course. So try and be very specific when you try and show why you belong to that school. Every essay should have something about, I want to join this club or I want to take this course. And then the roommate one, I think this is a one you have to be a bit more spontaneous about. So all the ones I've seen that have gotten in, everyone said something a bit crazy. So someone talked about Roblox. I talked about Harry Styles, and Delulu is the Salulu. So just try and be a bit out there so they remember you.
Okay, I think the roommate intro is fun. I can read Delulu is Solulu. I can read those labels are not typos. They're written in Malay, alright? And my room looks messy. Okay, this is interesting. Yep, I think I'll certainly take a second look at these essays separately after our discussions. They look interesting to miss out. Yeah, I really want to ask you this question. Did you write anything in your additional information section? And let's, after answering this question, let's slowly move into recommendation letters and yeah, how many you submitted and what were the people. But first, let's address additional information.
Yeah, I didn't send any supplements or any additional stuff because I didn't think I needed it.
There's an opinion actually that I heard from one of my friend who got into. I'm sorry, I'm just forgetting the English language for some reason. So I heard from my friend who got into Harvard that, oh, in additional information section, you have to try to validate all of your activities just to show as much as media files and like links and certificates for internship, etc., etc. You didn't include anything.
No, I didn't send anything. Because I was watching some TikToks online from other people, and they said like unless you have something really important to say, don't use it. If not, the admissions officer's like going to be annoyed that you gave them more stuff to read over, basically.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Like additional information section is just extra work for admissions officers, and the more you write, the more their annoyance level increases. Almost like
I think like if you have something really strong, like I don't know, if you're like a professional musician, you want to send them a file, do that. Or like if you have really good research, do that. But if not, I don't think it's worth like the risk.
yes. Did you leave the links for your social media?
No, I didn't.
Oh really? Do you think they found this online themselves or something?
Uh, I don't know, because I had my so about letters of rec. Basically, instead of me proving it myself, I made sure my teachers knew about it when they wrote my letters of rec. And I didn't see the recommendations, but I'm assuming they did what I asked and they talked about it, so it already confirmed it was real.
Yes.
And I know as well to check, they called my school and asked like, is she real? Did she actually do this? So I think they will check it without you having to like prove it to them.
Yes. Oh yeah. About this, I also heard the opinion of like, they if they are really interested, they could Google, and if your like achievements are as impressive as you describe them in the Common App, then they will likely to pop up. And if they don't pop up, well, that's a bit of like red flag if you say, oh, I
Yeah.
won this major international award, but there's nothing on Google, which is weird. Yeah.
One thing I think as well is good is having a LinkedIn, just so you have the proof of it. If you put that on your LinkedIn, so on my LinkedIn, I had the certificates on there. So if they wanted to check, they could see it there, but I'm not giving them extra work if they don't want it.
Oh, wait, let's connect on LinkedIn.
Yeah, for sure. I'll send it to you later on Instagram. Actually, yeah, if anyone else wants to add me on LinkedIn as well, it's just Elisa C.
Yeah, don't worry. I will leave all the links for all the social media that you ever had in my link. And at the end of our discussion,
Yes, I need all the plugs.
yes, exactly. And guys, just the fact that a person like Elisa was willing to share her Common App file openly, like because this is pretty rare. People who get into top schools tend to be more secretive or like, oh, this is too personal, or no, don't really want to share about it. So that's really brave of you, genuinely. Like not because I invited you and you came in as a guest, but genuinely this is brave. And yeah, I hope applicants, international applicants, and US citizens will find your file useful. Yeah, now let's get into recommendation letters. How many you submitted and who were they?
Yeah, so I only sent 3 in, and they were all school teachers. So I got my history teacher to send one, my chemistry teacher, and then my math teacher.
Chemistry, math, and history, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and then there's the counselor recommendation. So I go to a boarding school. So my like boarding school, like the head mistress from my boarding school basically sent it in. Oh, not head mistress, sorry, like the person in charge of the dorm I
Oh,
stayed
sure,
at.
sure. Counselor sent it essentially.
Yeah.
Sure. What, as far as I'm assuming, you gave the teachers a brag sheet or like bullet points of what you would like they talk about, right? Would you want to talk about that in more detail?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually didn't do a brag sheet. Instead, I like went and had like a chat with them one on one, and then
Oh.
we discuss. I think it's more important that you talk about it so you both agree on what should be in it. Because like if I say like write about this and you're like, what the hell is this? That's not going to be that useful. So instead spend like 10 minutes and align with them. So I don't have like a record of what we wrote because they took notes themselves.
Sure.
But I'll try and share what I remember saying. So for the chemistry teacher, he supervised some of the work I did with the refugee school and the local school. So I got him to talk about that to validate that proof because most of it was out of school, but he knew about it.
Sure.
And then also he taught me for like 4 or 5 years. So he talked more my academic side as well and how sort of in my school reports, he normally talks about being the best in the school, the best student he's ever taught, which Harvard seems to really value. So I assumed he wrote something to that extent in the letter, but obviously I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's mainly chemistry. So it's mainly academic vitality as well as refugee work. And then for my history teacher, when I applied for the UN grant, he's the one who wrote a recommendation for that as well. So he talked about the work I did for MUN. What else? Yeah, mainly my MUN stuff as well as debate. And also I'm assuming history, politics, and that sort of thing, and how I do a lot of it out of school. And then what was it? Oh, for my math teacher, he talked more about my STEM side as well. So the math awards I did. And he was also the head of our like secondary school. So he talked us like more just in general about how like in the cohort I was one of the strongest students, like doing charity, doing everything, and like well-rounded.
Yeah.
And then for my counselor letter, which we had a uni counselor, but she didn't write my letter. It was like someone else. But basically, they wrote more about my like personal qualities. So in like our boarding house, I helped coordinate events, and like I was responsible and like mature, like more the human side of me,
Yes.
which I think is really important as well.
What was your personal context? Like you mentioned the fact that in Malaysia, the knowledge about, for example, charities is obscure and like it's not really tracked and it's not that transparent. And what were more of such personal context? Because I think this is very interesting, especially to a admissions officer who's looking for this personal context. What would you say were more of personal context that you included, like family responsibilities or something that was unique to your circumstances?
Yeah, for sure. So I know a lot of people worry because like I had this worry as well. Like I've heard of some essays like the letter S, right? When they sort of trauma dump and then they obviously experienced stuff and they wrote about it. But I was fortunate to like not have to go through stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I don't know what to write about. So instead I focus more on like my personal experiences. So my culture growing up in Malaysia or my work with refugees, which is something that makes me a bit more unique. So finding a way to show awareness that even if you are privileged, you recognize it and then what you did with it instead of like trying to trauma dump when you don't have trauma that exists, because that makes you look a bit sort of pathetic, to be honest.
Yeah, and it also looks fake, like when you have something of more, I don't know, fascination, of something more interesting, like working with refugees, and you're just saying, oh no, let me put that aside and let me just, I don't know, exaggerate the story and write a sober essay so they could feel sorry about me or something like this. Yeah, I think,
Yeah, I've seen way too many people write sport injuries essays, and like unless it's something really, really serious, they don't even know you sprained your ankle.
yeah. Okay, so this has been very insightful for me at least. Guys, let me know in the comments what you think. And of course, for the I think fifth time for our discussion, all the links for social media for Elisa is in the description, especially TikTok. She really is very working on her TikTok. Yeah, my question is, let's put it this way: what are the top 3 things you think like, yeah, this is the thing? Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. We have the real proof from admissions officer saying we like this part and that part, right?
Mhm.
Could you talk more about that? Like, what was that? And what did admissions officers emphasize?
Yeah, for sure. So in the email I got, it literally only mentioned, we look forward to seeing you, and then we really appreciate learning about social media activism. So I don't actually know too much. I can get my file when we get to Harvard, so I'll know more about why I got in, which is really interesting to me as
Oh,
well.
sure, sure, sure,
But
sure. This is
yeah,
very
so
interesting
maybe
to
I'll
us
update you
too,
on that.
yes. Yeah, and I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that Elisa will share it on her social media, right? So you
Yes,
really,
I'm loving the plugs.
yes, you really don't want to miss it out. But okay, aside from the official comments of the admissions officer, what do you think, in your opinion, you're like, oh yes, this thing, I'm pretty sure they liked it about your application?
Yeah, for sure. So, if people have seen the Harvard lawsuits before, they basically revealed what they look for in students. They look for extracurriculars, they look for academics, whatever. And I think for me, academically, like I was qualified, but also I didn't do like any groundbreaking research. Like I haven't done anything that's not published or whatever. So I know that wasn't my main thing. So I think my main two things were within my school context because no one in my school has gotten to an Ivy League before, like to one of those types of unis. So I think that sort of set us apart as well. So for me, they recognize that my context, I guess, was those less experience with uni admissions. And then with that as well, I think they value. So I've seen, I can't remember what it was, but someone said basically, if your teachers say you're the best student they've ever taught, or like the best, like in their career or whatever, they value that quite highly. So I think that's one of the reasons. Oh, if you're an international, generally, if you get an interview, you're like qualified to be considered. If not, I have not heard yet of an international who's got in without an interview, but I might be wrong.
Oh yes, this is true. This is very, very
Yeah.
true. So
Yeah, because I know in the US it's not the same.
yep, it's very, very different international and US, and also in terms of the essay levels that international students need to face and the US students need to face, and that just logically makes sense because the ratio of like is 90 to 10%. I think at Harvard it's a bit more, but yeah, it's generally like 85 to 15%. And yeah, though that certainly makes sense. Now I really want to talk about the new Harvard essays that they released, which are, by the way, four of them is identical, like,
Uh,
but one of them did change. So could you please Google it, or could you please search it up, and we could really
yeah,
talk.
sure. Give me 2 seconds.
Sure, sure.
I didn't know they changed the essays. That's interesting.
They only changed one. Yeah. So
Which one, if you remember?
let it be an intrigue for you to find out. Right? So the we could focus on the ones that are the same. So they didn't change.
Uh,
The contribution essay is the same.
oh, the strongly disagreed one, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the new one.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Which one? So roommates are the same. Education semester. So which one did they remove then? Education plans?
Did they remove intellectual experience? Or yeah, I think they removed intellectual experience or something. I asked, let's try to brainstorm of some ideas or some of the ways we could strategize this. So, for example, in life, or sorry, for unique contribution essay, which is the first essay, as far as I understand, you wrote about your extracurriculars and how that connects to Harvard's resources. So essentially, your past experience connecting it to Harvard's resources and how that matches perfectly, essentially. Yeah, so that's I really want you to talk about it. So I did this. I recommend doing this, for example, for this essay, and etc.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So yeah, for the first one, as you said, diverse, like you can interpret diverse however you want to. So it doesn't just mean like ethnic background or whatever. It could literally mean anything you've done that makes you a bit different. So my work with the refugees. And then yeah, so find a specific thing at the uni, so Harvard, that you think that you can contribute to. For the disagreed one, obviously that's not one I did, but just reading it now, honestly, I think you could do something intellectual as well. So you can talk about like either a debate you've had with someone or just anything. But
Intellectual
try and use this
discussion.
in your academic side. Yeah, 100%. I mean, you could talk about something teamwork related because it says how did you communicate or engage with them. But I just think you are applying to like one of the top like academic institutions in the world. I know. So obviously this one doesn't talk about academic stuff as explicitly, but I just think if you're applying to the top research uni, not top research, but top like academic institution in the world, it would be a bit strange if you don't talk about anything academic in your application whatsoever. Maybe if your common app was about research or whatever, you could get away with using this for something more extracurricular because it does talk about experience, so it's a bit more vague. But I just think there should be at least one essay in your whole thing contributed solely to showing your academic side. If not, like it doesn't make sense in my opinion.
And then contributing it
Moving
to
on.
the Harvard resources. So
Oh yeah, for sure.
starting with your experience, and then at the end of the essay, just showing a unique way you would contribute to Harvard. So, for example, if it's an intellectual discussion, I think how you would contribute to clubs, academic clubs in your major, for example, like just unique, very research niche clubs, for example. It's just something that
Oh yeah.
I could think of from the back of my mind. And oh, by the way, I forgot to ask, in the intellectual experience essay, in the last paragraph, was it your courses that you wrote about?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So I think I'd recommend actually, you mentioned clubs, but I'd say it's better to show that you've actually researched the courses. So if you Google like Harvard courses for whatever year, they will have a list of courses. So here like Gov 94 BD is a course. And then I specified I want to do this course. And I think that shows you've firstly gone through the effort to research them, but also that you're joining there for the courses, because that's what a uni is, right? It's first and foremost the classes and then the clubs and everything else.
Yep.
But just a more general point as well, like you mentioned, with all the essays, you want to be showing, so not just the one when they ask why Harvard, but for all of them, you want to be linking it back to resources they have. So here I talked about courses, and then for ECs, I talked about, oh, actually, I didn't talk about that. For education, I talked about courses. So everything should be linked to Harvard as much as possible. And going back now to the essays, the third one is about extracurriculars. Once again, you can interpret this as vaguely as you like to best show your story. So as I said, before you even start writing essays or thinking what you're going to write, make a list of the key, like 3-4 things you want them to know about you, and then find how you can plug it into the prompts. So here, like you could basically plug in anything, honestly, because anything can be an extracurricular. You can talk about giving people tuition. You can talk about family responsibilities. Once again, talk about what you did, and then link it to a club or link it to anything you've learned specifically. Harvard education in the future. This one, I think it's really important, firstly, to talk about a class that you want to learn from, because it mentions education so specifically, and they want to know your academic side as well. They can also talk about future career plans if you'd like. My only caution with that would be, don't just say, oh, I want to solve like climate change, or oh, I want to cure cancer. Like that's so vague. Like talk about something a bit more niche or a bit more attainable. So you're not like some like wishful thinking sort of kid. You like actually have a clear plan or direction in mind. So I've heard of someone, and I think it was really effective. They talked about carbon credits. They're like, we're going to implement carbon credits to solve climate change. So that's something you can actually do, right? That's an actionable step. It's not, oh, I'm just going to cure world hunger or whatever. Okay, and then the final one is the roommates one. And so if you looked at the Harvard ruling before, one of the scores is the personality thing. And I think, especially if you're an American and maybe you won't get interviewed, but you're still in the running to get in, you really need to show your personality in this essay, because it's one of the things they rank as well. So here, like for mine, it was just a bit out there. And I think it's really worth taking the risk, because remember, your chance of getting in is so low already. Like, don't worry about like doing something that's that crazy to the point they'll reject you. Like, okay, yeah, don't say something racist, don't say something stupid. But also, like, don't be afraid to show be a bit more unhinged, or be a bit more real. It's like I talked about Harry Styles and like TikTok and like a bit more crazy stuff. And I think that makes them remember you a bit more as well.
Take more risks, essentially. The advice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, you know, like you're applying to a school and like it's a lottery whether you get in anyway or not. So any way you can make yourself a bit more stand out there, you know, that's always good.
Yeah, like you're going to get rejected anyway. Relax and write your best essay. I think it's one of the ways you could approach it. And if you do get in, like this is a very nice surprise. And if you don't, like you don't really have the expectations that just ruined.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And also like obviously proofread your essays, but in one of my essays, I can't remember, but there was like a typo, and like when I read it after, I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to get in because I wrote like something grammatically wrong.
Yes.
But I still got in, so it's fine. So don't stress too much. Like, yes, take it seriously. Yes, take the time. But like they don't expect you to be 100% perfect. You'll be okay.
In how many days did you write your entire essays, all of your essays?
Okay, so my Common App I wrote from like August until, I took the whole of August for that. And then until November, so after I finished my Common App, I was writing my supplements. So I took like a lot of time with them. And like, I don't recommend writing them last minute because you need to strategize so much. It just doesn't make sense to do it last minute.
Yep, so from the beginning of the August until the deadline of November 1, right?
So I actually submitted like a bit before November 1. So like maybe a week before, but yeah, basically up to the deadline.
Oh yeah, sure. Very organized. Something to take note for a lot of international students, unfortunately.
Especially if you're applying to other countries as well, like make sure you have everything sorted out early.
You applied to Harvard early, right? Restrictive Early Action.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
were you planning to apply to other schools in the US, and or were you like, oh, if that's not Harvard, that's the UK? What were your college plans if it's not Harvard, or did you apply to others, or were you writing essays for other US schools?
Yeah, I applied to the other Ivy Leagues as well, and then also the UCs.
Did you get your results, or did you revoke your application after Harvard's acceptance?
I still waited for the results. I was just looking at the financial aid offerings. So for the UCs, I got into UCLA, UCSD, and then UC Davis. Got waitlisted by Berkeley, waitlisted by Princeton, waitlisted by Dartmouth, waitlisted by one more, UPenn. Then I got rejected by the rest.
Oh, really? So
Mhm.
only Harvard, right?
Yeah,
Only the best one, essentially.
got my dream school, so I can't complain.
Yeah, yeah, especially for government, political science, like Harvard is literally number one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's ignore Yale for a second. And yeah, so I think this is a very interesting story that because a lot of people think, oh, if I got rejected from Dartmouth, it's like that's it. I'm not gonna get into Harvard because they think Dartmouth is lower in level or like lower in prestige or something. Which might be true in terms of rankings, but as you can see, you can get rejected from all of the schools and still get into Harvard. So yeah, don't be too upset if you got rejected from other schools. Um, so we discussed, I think we really covered everything. We covered your activities and essays and even recommendation letters. Let's talk for now about your future plans and at Harvard. So it's obviously government and economics, but also what are you
Oh,
planning to do
actually, I'm
exactly?
doing government and computer science. Sorry, yeah, I'm not doing economics anymore. Changed my mind. So I think something I just want to share with people as well is you can just choose to apply with a major. Like I don't think anyone should apply undecided. Like choose a major that just makes sense because you can always change your mind. So I changed to government computer science and like they don't care.
Yeah. And as far as I know, computer science you can apply to internships, I think, from your freshman year, right?
I'm not too sure actually. I know as an international, there's a lot I have to like figure out with like visas and whatever. So
Oh
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
gonna
sure,
wait
sure,
until
sure.
I'm there and see what
How is the
happens.
visa process in Malaysia? Because I could share about Uzbekistan, and this is just the state
Mhm.
of things is horrible. It's literally like 20%, literally. And there was even a joke that getting a visa is harder than getting into Harvard or something in Uzbekistan. Literally.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yes, so you have to have kind of like double luck to get and visa and Harvard because there was a situation where a guy got into Princeton and he didn't get visa.
Mhm.
So he had to choose the other school.
No.
Yeah, this is just painful. This is just ridiculous.
Oh, that's
Yes,
madness.
how is that?
From what I've heard, oh yeah, so from my experience, there was like a long queue, and I've heard of other people getting rejected, but mainly the Ivy League students had no issue. So my interview was literally just, oh, you're going to Harvard, okay, well done, and I got my visa. And in the group chat as well, I actually heard from someone from Uzbekistan in our group chat as well who had the same thing. Just because it was Harvard, he got his visa fine. So I think maybe just the brand name pushes you along a bit as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, sure. How long was your visa interview?
Like literally 2 seconds, they were like, okay, well done, you got into Harvard. Okay, here's your
Come
visa.
on, really? Meanwhile, all
It was
the
so nice.
Meanwhile, all the consulting firms preparing for days for those interviews.
Oh God.
Yeah, yeah, this is ridiculous. You said there was someone from Uzbekistan in the chat?
Oh yeah, in the Harvard group chat as well, who got his visa. He said like the same thing. Like there was a long queue to have the interview, but the interview itself was very short.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I heard the same thing
Yeah.
about Princeton and other top schools. Like, as
Mhm.
long as you have the name, like in most cases, it's not a problem.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, yeah, okay. I think I could finish the recording right now.